Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the meeting. I'm Councillor David Jeffries, and I'm chairing today's committee meeting. To my right are the planning officers Anthony Deavy and Keith Thompson. To my left are Jane Dale from Democratic Services and Diane Hayden, solicitor. Also in the chamber are members of the committee and the public. Arrangements for dealing with planning applications. An officer summary and update will be given. Items involving members of the public will be dealt with first, and speakers are restricted to 3 minutes with a warning of 30 seconds remaining. Speakers are not permitted to circulate additional information, including photographs, plans or petitions. Any councillor not on the committee who has requested to speak will also be given 3 minutes. Members are to note the information given by officers and speakers. Any decision proposed which is contrary to the recommendations contained in the report will require reasons for the proposal if it's to refuse, and reasons and conditions if it is to approve the application. In accordance with the Council's equality policy, speakers are asked to refrain from making any comments which could be construed as being discriminatory, defamatory or otherwise it will be necessary to intervene. Additionally, I would request that although differing views may be expressed, people respect those differences. Please ensure mobile phones are switched to silent to avoid any disruption during the meeting. And also, whilst you are not speaking, can you put yourself on mute if you have not already done so? Fire procedure. If the fire alarm sounds, attendees will be directed where to go. Please follow instructions given by the officers. Right, we'll move on to the agenda. Agenda item number 1, declarations of pecuniary, non-pecuniary, prejudicial interests and declarations under section 4 of the Planning Code of Practice for dealing with planning applications. Members to declare any interest in items on the agenda and the nature of such interest. Are there any such declarations? Yes, Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, item 4 on page 5, Westfield Farm. I made a visit this morning to the area, but I didn't speak to any of the residents at all. And also, I'd like to declare that in the officer's report, it makes comment that the proposed development could have an effect on the trade in Ellerton, Cumbrough and Hesel Ward Councillor. And also, item 6 on page 53, I visited the area this morning, but didn't speak to any residents at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bother. Anybody else? Just regarding agenda item number 5, this was discussed at Goole Council meeting, but I made no comments regarding this application. Thank you. Right. Agenda item number 2, to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting of this subcommittee held on the 13th of May 2025, pages 1 to 3. Any proposers? Councillor Meredith, seconded. Councillor Casson, all in favour? Thank you. Items, agenda item number 3. Are there any withdrawals at all?
No withdrawals, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Right, we'll move on now to the first planning agenda item. Agenda item number 4.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for planning permission for the conversion of some existing stable buildings to a farm shop and cafe with a covered seating area, an outdoor seating area and associated flexible retail office units within use class E, the installation of solar panels, a new access and associated works including parking provision and soft landscaping at Westfield Farm, Westfield Lane in Swanland. The officer recommendation is approval and there are no updates to the report as printed. Thank you, Chairman. Thank
you very much. Right, on this agenda item, our first speaker is Ms. Kay Hinchcliffe, objector. You can just, yes, you just either the chairs at the front, any of those. Ms. Hinchcliffe, you have 3 minutes with the 30-second warning. You need to press that long bar at the front for the speaker. The red light will come on.
Is there a timer somewhere or a timer that I can see what time? I get a warning. Okay. Right. Perfect. Okay. First time doing this, so I do apologise. If it appears, I don't know what I'm doing, but this format here, sitting is completely new to me, and I'm a little bit out of my comfort zone, but I still thought it was important to be here today. So good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I want to start by saying that I understand the appeal of supporting rural enterprise and local business. In principle, a small, well-considered farm shop or cafe would be a welcome addition to the community. Swanland is a thriving village with residents who value local amenities. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah. Although my neighbours have said to me, why even bother coming here today? Because they said that they have lost a lot of faith with many planning applications in the village in the last few years. However, I still thought it was important to be here today. This particular application raises significant concerns about scale, suitability, and cumulative impact. What is being proposed here goes far beyond a small rural outlet with 68 parking spaces, a cafe with outdoor seating, flexible retail space, and the potential to host events such as weddings and birthday parties. This resembles a commercial visitor destination, not a modest community facility. The traffic implications alone are substantial, with the nearby 150 home housing development already set to generate a possible 1,000 additional vehicle movements per day. This proposal could add another 350 plus on top of that. That's substantial traffic increase. And yet no new roads or infrastructure improvements have been proposed to my knowledge. Westfield Lane and the surrounding junctions are narrow, rural, and simply not built to handle that kind of demand. Large delivery trucks, catering vans, and even buses for events would seriously strain the roads and create safety risks, especially for children and pedestrians. Swanland has already become incredibly busy due to housing developments, etc. There are also concerns about air pollution and idling vehicles, particularly at tight junctions such as Westfield Lane.
You have 30 seconds left.
Okay. I will finish just very quickly about the transport statement at I think it's 6.3 noted. 24 two-way vehicles, etc. I would really advise or ask you to relook at that, because that's not what I worked out. We're looking at 350 to 680 per day with 68 parking spaces.
Thank you very much
Thank
indeed.
you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. A. Hodgson, applicant's agent. Again, 3 minutes, Mr. Hodgson, with a 30-second warning.
Good afternoon, members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. When this scheme came to me as the planning agent, it became evident straight away that it had great potential for conversion to a farm shop and cafe. We advise on these types of development across the country, and seeing the range of buildings and the associated land with it, which would provide for car parking, it was an ideal scenario to convert and keep these wonderful buildings and get them back into a reuse that's of a high quality. So this scheme has been well thought out. We've been advised by Appetite Meal, the leading diversification company in the UK. We've had Arkelboyce Architects on to do all of the architecture work, and I think you'll see from the plans it's a very high quality finish. And us on the planning side of things, we've looked at all sorts of work with Karen Abba, the planning officer, to address all of the matters. And I think we've got no statutory objections to this application from a technical point of view, which is through the hard work that we've taken in making sure that we addressed all of the points. In terms of highways, even before we submitted the planning application, we did a pre-application with the Highways Department to make sure that we were going to be okay with access and on traffic generation. The traffic generation mentions the comparable in the transport assessment. We compared it to other farm shops, so it's a like-for-like comparison. So it's really the most accurate information you can get in terms of the traffic generation for a farm shop. In terms of the access, that's been upgraded to make sure there's a good pedestrian visibility. And I think the other comment that came in, that was people was amenity of residents, where we've done a full sort of air quality assessment, noise assessment, and made sure that, and a lighting design, which makes sure there's no impact on neighbouring residents. This scheme is going to be a fantastic facility for the village. It's going to offer farm shop and cafe, a social meeting place, jobs, and it keeps the wonderful buildings in a reuse that is in a highly sustainable location, which is now within the settlement boundary of the village. It's really is a positive scheme in that respect. The flexible retail units are an added bonus. They will be available for local businesses to move into, which is it's really difficult in this day and age to find startup units. So those are an added benefit. So the benefits of the scheme really outweigh any harm. And what I would say is that we've worked really incredibly hard to make sure that this scheme addresses all of the points that were raised by both the Parish Council. I think that's all I've got to say, really, that in that respect. We're very happy with the officer's recommendation and the report that's in front of you today. And it's taken an incredible amount of work to get to that position. And we hope we've covered off everything to your satisfaction. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Elton. Just turn your microphone. Thank you very much indeed. We have a third speaker, which is Councillor Hopton.
Good afternoon, everyone. This application has taken a while to get to this stage after the public consultation that took place last summer. This would be a good scheme if it wasn't in an awful location, given the huge impact it will have on local residents. What isn't in doubt is that something needs to happen with this site. However, is something on this scale suitable for this location at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac? There is a planning history on this site, and as such, I strongly disagree with the statement in the planning report that none of this is relevant to the application. The very, very contentious Gladman application on behalf of the same landowner, where 150 houses not in the local plan have been forced onto Swanland and the East Riding by the local planning inspectorate. This huge housing estate has effectively left this site with no alternative vehicle access due to it having no thought to the remaining part of the site, which is what's up for consideration today. Personally, the transport statement is a piece of fiction. It states that there will be 24 trips to this site at morning peak time and 13 in the afternoon. Absolute nonsense. What about the weekend? These places tend to be most popular at the weekend. Where are those figures in the report? No mention whatsoever provided for consideration. If so few cars, how will it be commercially viable? And if so few journeys, why are there 68 car parking spaces and over 100 seats planned in the cafe? These seem like glaring omissions / errors from this transport statement. As such, what else is wrong or missing? This development will change this quiet road completely. Already faced with traffic from an unwanted 150 new houses, now the residents are faced with hundreds of car movements every week to this very large destination venue, which will be mainly visited by car and not pedestrians. This car park will be regularly full, and as such, lots of on-street parking will result on a bend of a quiet residential street that will create many issues. There are lots and lots of unanswered questions in the planning report, re highways, Yorkshire Water, nature conservation, archaeology, etc., etc. Due to the very long-running saga where residents of Westfield Lane, Sites Close, etc. feel ignored and let down by the system, as mentioned earlier by the lady speaking, there is a great deal of complaint fatigue in this area, and as such, many of the opinion, why bother to write in and complain? They'll do it anyway. It's ironic that this site was in open countryside, but due to East Riding being overruled by the planning inspectorate and having this housing estate forced on it, this site is now not in open countryside. Quite ironic, really. The report says that it will have significant economic and social benefits to Swanland. I would argue that local residents and the parish council clearly disagree. Please do not do a Gladman and roll roughshod over these residents once again.
You have 30 seconds left.
Thank you, Jane. I would urge you to consider a site visit before making any decisions, as without going to see the site, you cannot possibly fully envisage the impact that this will have on this community. Many thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hopton. Right, councillors, I'll put this out to the committee members. Yes, Councillor Harrison.
I suppose my first question is, what am I judging the use case on? Is it a small rural farm shop, or is it a rural farm shop and an events space? Because I think going back to the points that have been made with regard to the traffic report. Now, I mean, I don't know the area, so I don't know whether it's 24 or whether it's going to be 68, but it would seem to me that if it is going to be a large event space, then that wouldn't be, it's not representative of what the traffic would actually be. So I just want to be clear on what is it we're expecting this set of buildings to be used for, just a farm shop or a larger event space?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. The application proposes a farm shop, restaurant and cafe and flexible office/retail units. There are specific conditions controlling the nature of the uses and the times that those can operate. So 8 until 6 on Monday to Saturday, and 9 until 4 on Sundays and bank holidays. So that would significantly restrict any events. There wouldn't be evening events or anything like that as proposed under these hours that we were suggesting within the report. Obviously, the cafe restaurant area has a large open plan area where the seating is. So, you know, you could have events within that space, but the application proposes a restaurant and cafe and a farm shop with those additional flexible units you can see on the floor plans there. And we have got conditions restricting those units to be laid out as proposed and not knocked into more units or combined to create one large additional shop, say. So we want the scheme to be developed as put forward in the package of information by the applicant. Thank you, Chairman.
Any other councillor wishing to make any comments on this? Yes, Councillor Boville.
Thank you, Chair. As I mentioned earlier, I had a quick visit this morning. I've looked around the area because I've never been there before. So I made a few notes there. Looking at it, basically, what I saw was predominantly a residential area. The road is narrow. There would no doubt be a significant increase in traffic, particularly at busy periods. As already mentioned, the access is on a bend. Now, if this business was to go ahead and it was successful, I can imagine there would be quite a lot of on-street parking in order to accommodate the customers. That I would see would cause problems. I looked on sites close when I walked around there. There was a little grassed area, and I can imagine the potential for some irresponsible motorists to actually perhaps park part on and part off that, which would be a shame. Now, as for the actual development itself, it looks very good. You know, what has been offered there, and it's a great use of agricultural buildings which aren't being used anymore. So that is a big plus. But my concern is the nature of the increase in traffic and everything. Now, I do understand a lot of work has gone onto this between the applicants and the officers. I've looked at it in a lot of detail. So I don't want to comment any further on this, but I'm interested to see what other people have to say on it. Thank you.
Councillor Wilkinson, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've looked really carefully at this, and I have to say that I am concerned about some of the information that's lacking or being omitted. I mean, for instance, the highways. I struggle to see how those figures can be correct in this. And whilst I'm not saying that our experts don't have put incorrect information, I just think some's missing from that. And I think that we can't make a proper judgment on the impact on the local area if we don't have the correct figures. How do we know what's happening at the weekend? How many road movements there are? This is a small residential area with a road that's designed for going to residences, and therefore having a business at the end of it on top of this 150 houses that was imposed against our view by the planning inspectorate in this area. So there's all of those extra vehicles going down this small residential road, and then adding to this, having this one, and they don't have a highways view that gives us all the information we require. In terms of that, I think I agree with the ward councillor on the fact that we can't make a proper judgment without we go and see this. And I propose that we go for a site visit on this one. I'm not one to do that. I tend to avoid trying to do that because it's just delaying the inevitable. But I think in this particular case, it's vitally important given the fact that, as the objector has mentioned, she feels that that her local residents feel let down by planning within this. And I think that might be something to do with this 150 houses from Gladman. And I have to point out that that wasn't us. That was the planning inspectorate who overruled us. And that we do try to do our best for everybody. And but in this particular case, without seeing it, I think it's going to be really difficult. So I do propose that. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Gill was next.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, similar thoughts really. I think the scheme is fantastic, and I think I'm all for supporting this type of business. Farm shops, associated things with it, are very popular indeed. And I live at Elliston and Brough, and it's the sort of place, you know, my wife and I would probably visit from where we live. And obviously I'm saying because of that popularity, there could be victims of their own success here, because you've got a lot of people locally that may walk to it. But once these things get popular, car parking is a problem. And, you know, somebody's already mentioned the potential of on-street parking. I think I, along with probably residents on this case, are not convinced about how the traffic departments come up with these figures. And I want to propose two things. I'll second the proposal for the site visit. And if I could also propose that, could we have some sort of public document on how, just for our own information, how these things are worked out? What's it based on? And I think something like that should be a bit more public information so we can make a more informed decision.
Thank you, Chairman. The transport statement that's submitted in support of the application is a public document. It's on the file for you to look at and read the information, and that is prepared by the applicant and has been assessed by the council's highways officers who are satisfied that the site can operate safely, that the access is adequate for the vehicles and anticipated trip movements, and that the parking is appropriate for the size and scale of the development. Obviously, you've mentioned missing information or misleading information. The highway officer has carried out a robust assessment of the transport statement and hasn't found it lacking in any way in terms of the information that's been provided. Obviously, the 24 two-way trips refers to how many, looking at similar developments of this nature and scale, how many trips might you anticipate this to generate within the peak period in the morning and the peak period in the afternoon, in the evening. Obviously, with this not opening till 9 o'clock, you're probably going to miss that peak AM period anyway. And the 13 vehicle trips during the peak PM period is when people are, you know, coming home from work. And obviously, I sympathise with the local residents regarding the scheme for housing next door and the amount of traffic that will generate, obviously, down Westfield Lane. But obviously, we are where we are with that. We need to consider this application on its merits, and the highway officer has in assessing this application looked at the traffic that will be generated by that, the traffic that will be generated on the current development, and the traffic that would be anticipated to be associated with the development of this type and scale. So, like I say, just to reiterate that a thorough assessment has been carried out by officers and highway officers, and that we've not found any technical reasons to object on highway safety grounds. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I believe I wanted to next, Councillor Coltish.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to second the site visit, but well done, Councillor Gill, for doing that. I do think it's a brilliant scheme. I love the architecture, the thought, the effort that's gone into this, and it's a brilliant plan on paper. However, I do share the concerns of local residents and perhaps agree that it's maybe in the wrong place, unfortunately. That being said, I don't know the area too well, so that's why I'm happy to go on the site visit. My biggest concern, just so committee members understand, I'm not sure currently we have strong enough grounds to refuse this, given the information that Mr. Deavy just gave us about the planning department. So that's why the site visit would be helpful, I think, to the committee to understand those issues and understand the planning reasons that we could use to either approve or refuse this. Therefore, I would encourage members to vote in favour of the site visit. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Are you seconding the Councillor Wilkinson? Oh, you're sorry. Thank you. Right. Councillor Meredith, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me, thank you, Chair. As with councillors Gill and Coltish, I would be happy to second the site visit. I do know the area well, but councillor Coltish has rather clairvoyantly set me up, because another one of the concerns that has been raised is about the impact on the neighbouring residents, and actually seeing the site firsthand, seeing the proximity of houses, the quantity of houses. This brings to mind to me Croft Park in Little Wheaton, Langlands, or whatever they go by now. Actually, that's a long time since I've been there, in Shipton Thorpe, Droutons in South Cave and Little Bald Vineyard. They're all a long way out from the settlements, and this is right next to neighbouring properties. So we can talk about the highways and the roads, and I too have concerns about the reality of the numbers versus the guesstimations, shall we say, in the reports. But as I always say at this committee, if planning's an art, highways is a science. Similarly, when the objector spoke earlier, there was conversations about pollution. Well, unless people are coughing their insides out, planning officers couldn't refuse on those grounds, because the cap for pollution to be impactful in the decision-making process is so high it's inconsequential. So as Nick rightly pointed out, we need to look at this application and either presume in favour of sustainable development or find legitimate reasons to refuse it. I'm sharing Councillor Coltish's concerns there that I don't think highways would warrant sufficient grounds, but there are other things, and quite frankly, I don't think we'll be able to assess them accurately in this instance without going there to have a look. So I would argue we can't make an informed decision on this application as an individual application without having a look. So wholeheartedly supporting the comments of Councillors Gill, Coltish and Wilkinson there.
Thank you, Councillor Meredith. Councillor Robson, you wanted to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief. Basically, what everybody said, I concur with. I am very, very sympathetic with Ms. Hinchcliffe, the objector, to have something of this scale being suddenly landed on you in a close residential area is a little bit scary. I think that in actual fact, probably the way this would pan out if it does get built is going to be somewhere in between. There's going to be times when people are going to be trying to park on the grass, and there's going to be times when very little is going to be happening, because that's the way things tend to work out. So the reality is somewhere between the concerns of the neighbours and the highways officer, I think. However, when it comes to the highways officer, we've learned from bitter experience. I can think particularly of two applications in Hornsey where we turned down, for highways reasons and safety reasons, what we consider to be highways reasons and safety reasons, an application, but because of the fact that the highways officer said, oh, no problem, the inspectorate allowed an appeal in both cases, and we were shocked and horrified. So even if we go down this route of visiting the site and thinking, no, it's too pinched or whatever, and it's not suitable for that location, now that we've got the highways, the WHO said, saying that this is acceptable, we're in a very difficult position indeed. That's all I wanted to add.
Thank you, Councillor Robson. Any other councillors wishing to make? Yes, Councillor Needham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think it is an excellent plan, and it's an excellent use of this building. Unfortunately, like other colleagues around the table have said, is it really in the right location here? I would be very concerned about access to the roadway there through the housing development. And likewise, I sympathise with Swanland residents who have had housing imposed by Gladmans, as we have over 300 dwellings in Pocklington. What we've not touched upon is also the drainage, with regard to it being a food service area, and I'd be concerned about fat traps with it set up on the drainage from the kitchen there, and there are concerns already raised within that, and I'm not sure that they've all been addressed. So likewise, I do sympathise with the fact that when we're stating 68 car parking spaces here, we've all been to these setups. We've all been to Langlands and seen how they've grown over the years and extended their car park. We've all been to Droutons, where again, they've extended their car park due to the larger numbers attending. So if it's going to be successful, it's going to need more car parking. And in this particular location, it doesn't seem to be the correct one. I know some people raise concerns with regard to the use as an event centre, but obviously that's not something that we can discuss within planning. That would have to be referred to in licensing. So the close time is 6 p.m. But I think a site visit is the fair route forward, just to see this particular location, because I'm not familiar like some of my colleagues around the table. So I would support that. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'll just cover a couple of points if I may. The comparison of this to Langlands Garden Centre, which is a very well-established and large garden centre on the outskirts of Shipton Thorpe, or Drewton's estate, which includes a consented and very popular wedding venue and an events venue, is not really comparable, I would say. Obviously, this is talking about a farm shop and a cafe and / restaurant. So I think you need to be careful drawing a distinction between the amount of traffic that those uses might generate versus a farm shop in a village with a cafe. So just a word of caution there. And in terms of the Councillor Robson, I think touched on the point about the risk we might suffer at an appeal if you were to refuse planning permission on a highway safety ground against the technical advice of the council's highway officer. I think we would be on very difficult grounds if the applicant were to appeal against a decision like that. But I fully accept and understand your reasoning behind the requirement for a site visit. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Tom. Any more comments from any councillors? Right, well, the only proposal we have left, therefore, is from Councillor Wilkinson for a site visit, seconded by Councillor Gill. All those in favour? Thank you, councillors. That was unanimous. So we be to defer this planning application for a site visit, and then it will come back to this council at a future visit. Sorry, Councillor Gill, you wanted to say?
Yeah, no, thank you. It's just if we are going to do a site visit, is it possible to have various, like the entrance marked out and a number of things marked out so as to give us a sense of scale on site, please? That would be great. Thank you.
Possibility of. Well, the site entrance is the site entrance and the buildings are the buildings. So we'll see all of that on the site. Yeah, absolutely.
Right, okay then, thank you very much for considerations on that planning application. Thank you. We'll now move on to agenda item number 5.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for change of use of office space to residential, including the erection of a first floor extension to form 2 one-bedroom dwellings. There are no updates and the application is recommended for refusal as set out in the agenda.
Thank you. Our first speaker today on this agenda item is Mr. T. Clark, the applicant. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Clark, with a 30-second warning. You can just switch on your microphone at the front.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Tom. I am the applicant and the owner of the proposed site at the old post office. Some of you may be aware that I've recently completed the main development of the old post office to a high standard, which was received really well locally. It successfully provided 8 new homes, all of which were let pretty quickly and have remained at 100% occupancy since completion. This section of the development of the old post office looks to renovate an empty and dilapidated building that is a brownfield site into 2 modern and spacious townhouses. The architect and I have spent a lot of time ensuring the design is something that will enhance the street scene and really complement the conservation area. For example, all the windows have fan brick arches. They also have brick sill details. We've put 3 gable pitch dormers on the western elevation, again with brick detailing. And there's a pitch gable end on the Carlisle Street elevation that matches in with the street scene where we've taken inspiration from existing buildings. It would have been far easier and cheaper for us to just continue the flat roof that's existing on one of the adjacent buildings. But I felt strongly that it is needed to be something more thoughtful and in keeping with the local heritage and the impressiveness of the host building. We have also ensured the living accommodation is of a good size. The feedback I have from residents is they want homes that they can grow into a little bit and have space to live. So each townhouse is over 59 square meters, which is 60% larger than the national minimum space requirements for 1-bedroom homes, which is 37 square meters. We would much rather create spacious and desirable homes rather than trying to squeeze in as many units as possible, which is often the case. I understand there is a flood risk for the majority of Goole. Every flood risk assessment confirms this, and we have acknowledged this, and we have taken purposeful steps to try and mitigate that risk. Chief among which is we have raised the entire ground floor by a minimum of 600 millimetres, so that any flooding event that might one day occur has to reach a significant depth before it has any impact on this accommodation. We've also ensured that each house has access to a first floor place of safety, as well as all the usual flood risk mitigation measures like moving sockets higher and laying plasterboards horizontally. With Goule's recent push to regenerate the town centre and strengthen town centre living, this proposed development only supports this cause.
You have 30 seconds left.
Thank you. It brings a redundant building back into use, delivers much needed homes within the town centre, and enhances the street scene and the conservation area. Given the thoughtful design, clear local need, and the overall positive contribution, I hope this application can be supported. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker on this one is Councillor B. Jeffries. 3 minutes, Councillor Jeffries. 30-second warning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, community members of the committee. Housing needs recently identified one-bedroomed apartments are in short supply. Offering such accommodation is a necessary prerequisite to people taking up apprenticeships and offers of work, giving them the opportunity to live and work in Goole, thereby contributing to the income generated for Goole. The East Riding Local Housing Needs Assessment identifies that in terms of one-bedroom accommodation, Goole has only 5 to 10% of the recommended size and tenure mix. The East Riding prioritises the use of brownfield sites for housing development, aligning with the national policy to maximise the efficient use of land. The East Riding maintains a brownfield register of suitable sites and considers proposals in principle on these sites, ensuring appropriate consultation and public comment before making decisions. We need to attract people who work in Goole to live in Goole. We need to provide a mixture of good quality accommodation for singles and couples choosing to base themselves here, providing much needed accommodation for the increasing demands of our industry and associated workforce requirements based in Goole. Encouraging the efficient use of land by developing at densities local circumstances maximises the use of East Riding's limited supply of previously developed land. Given Goule's Freeport status, the need for further housing is paramount to keep workers staying and living in Goole, contributing to the council-based revenue and making the most of reusing large empty buildings and disused sites. With the recent £25 million provided to Goole for the redevelopment of the town, previously vacant buildings are being given a new lease of life. With additional accommodation brings people living in the town centre and increases the vitality of the town. I hope members will look favourably on this application and improve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffries. Thank you. Right, I'll put this open to the yes, Councillor Cottish.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The applicant spoke brilliantly, in my opinion, because Goole has historically had a bit of a reputation for sort of cowboy landlords and a lack of attention. But despite the fact that that exists and that this building is a bit of an eyesore, it's a bit of a dated building, it's clear that a lot of effort has gone into the design. It's of an extremely high quality. It's in a sustainable location. And all of the above. I'll make the point that I always make. I'm sorry to those of you that hear me say this every time an application like this in Goole comes up, but I find it ludicrous that we're in a situation whereby officers are forced, to be fair to them, to recommend this for a refusal when just 100 metres down the road you can buy a small terraced house on the riverbank and convert it into a HMO with 6 ground floor flats if you want, and there's absolutely nothing that this planning authority can do about it when a high quality sustainable development like this one comes forward. planning officers have no choice but to recommend it for refusal. So for those reasons, Mr. Chairman, I'll propose approval and take advice from planning officers on what conditions I'd like attached to that if it were to be approved. For the reason that it's in a sustainable location, there's mitigations against the flood risk, like the 600mm increased floor height, a place of safety on the first floor. It's of an exceptionally high quality. It provides housing that's in need in Goole, and it's in a sustainable location.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Coltish. Yes, Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Under normal circumstances, as the officers know, I have many times talked in favour of housing within Goole and the frustration that it is because of the situation at flood risk. The argument I have used quite regularly is quite clear. If we're going to redevelop Goole to become a viable centre, then we need to start agreeing to have habitable zones only on the first floor and above. So this is a rapid inundation zone, whether we like it or not, it is. And as such, we cannot have habitable parts on ground floors. We have sacrificial ground floors and on the first floor. That gives the officers a chance, even though they still wouldn't necessarily want to turn it down, at least it gives them the chance. To have a habitable zone on the ground floor, I'm afraid, is unacceptable in a rapid inundation zone. And I'm sorry, I cannot agree with this one, and I will recommend refusal as per the officer's recommendations. For that very reason, we cannot put our residents at risk just because we think that we should improve the local area in an old building.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Yes, Councillor Robson.
Thank you, Chair. I really do agree with everything Councillor Coltish has said. He's put it really quite concisely. In addition, the applicant, with what the applicant has said as well. So consequently, I'd like to second approval on this. I do understand, by the way, it's going to be catapulted to strategic, so so be it.
Yes, Councillor Gill.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've supported previous applications of this type in Goole, where we've had the flood risk problem. And I don't see any reason why I shouldn't change my mind on this one. I think these things are a good thing. I mean, otherwise, what happens to these buildings? You know, we've seen a number of larger buildings converted into apartments, and they've got approved by strategic and higher up. I mean, my mind is, I mean, Goole is desperate to be regenerated. I mean, what is going to happen to these buildings if we don't do something with them? Because I don't believe there is enough commercial business to take these things on, because it would have been happening already. So I'll go along with approving it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gill. Yes, Councillor Meredith.
Thank you, Chair. I must admit, I actually found this quite a difficult one. As Councillor Coltish has eloquently explained, there's issues with the rapid inundation zone and applications in Goole I won't go over again. But Councillor Wilkinson's comments are very valid as well about ground floor accommodation, specifically bedrooms. And if someone's asleep and, if anything like me, probably hungover, if there is water, then they might have a problem getting out. So there are genuine concerns. So I'm going to say the thing I always say at these committee meetings. Either the Environment Agency need to knock down Goole and build it somewhere safer, which is quite difficult because ports tend to be by the water, or they need to allow people to build and accommodate that fact, whether it's flood-proof doors, whether it's whatever it may be, any mitigations that are considered necessary. But this blanket ban means that probably every other committee meeting we get an application from Goole here where officers' hands are tied. So for me, I think Councillor Wilkinson said the sensible comments, but Councillor Gill actually touched on the most reasonable element, which is if we don't allow Goole to invest in itself, we may as well let it fall into the water. So whilst I share the concerns of Councillor Wilkinson, I am going to support approval because, quite frankly, if the £50 million defences fail, which is why the Environment Agency has the policy it does, then perhaps they should have built them better. And the Environment Agency's very disposition that we must plan for the failure of something we spent £50 million on is a shocking fallback position to be in. And quite frankly, they need to relook at everything they do.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Needham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've heard some very commanding pros and cons for this particular development, and myself has supported developments in Goole in the past, but it's where the accommodation has commenced from the first floor. And along with Councillor Wilkinson, I have grave concerns about development where living accommodation is on this ground floor in a rapid flood inundation zone. So I would be very concerned about this development. And I don't think with this particular one applicant, whilst I appreciate the work that's gone into it, it looks fantastic design. Again, as I said on a previous application, but in the wrong place. And this particular dwelling is not going to have a huge impact with regard to two dwellings within the town of Goole. So I would back that refusal, and I will second that. Thank you.
Sorry, it's not possible to second the refusal at the moment because we've got an approval on the table that's been seconded. And that's a direct negative. If it falls, then yeah.
Right, Councillor. If I just may add about this application, first of all, it's on a brownfield site, which is supposed to be taking priorities for redevelopment. We have many houses in Goole where people sleep on the first floor. There is no ground floor sleeping accommodation with this. So it's no different to every other house in Goole. The conservation officer speaks really well of it, the high level, where it'll be and what it can do. The applicant has shown us around many months ago, showed us around a previous conversion he did in the other part of the post office, and I can assure you it was very, very high quality. And it's nice to have a local builder doing stuff locally. And as Councillor Cotish eloquently said, not cowboy builders or out of town renters. So it's just the fact that this this application, where it is in a very prominent position, and as been pointed out, we're spending a great deal of money in the centre of Goole, and it is a complete eyesore, and it's been empty for 10 years. And it was, I think it was a joiner's workshop prior to that. But it is just an eyesore. And when this application came, we were I think a lot of the councillors in Goole were very keen on it, because then it will just, uplift that corner of Goole, because we've got other applications that will be coming through for other older properties in that area, and this will just complement them. So that's just my opinion. So obviously, but I believe that there's, if we recommend this, I said if we recommend this for refusal, there's an item regarding the SAMs. Could I just bring you in that case, please, for me?
Yes, through you, Chairman. Yeah, you touched on a couple of points there. I'll just clarify as a matter of fact. The proposal doesn't include any ground floor sleeping. It's habitable space. So as you can see from the plans, it's first floor sleeping only. Secondly, it hasn't got a recommendation to send it to planning committee if you're minded to approve it. It was considered that the development isn't of significance to refer to planning committee. It's conversion and part extension. So we don't believe that's a matter that we would refer to planning committee. So you can determine it here and it ends here. Just a third point, I don't think officers are forced into a corner with applications in Goole, despite what's said at this meeting. We're balancing competing interests here, as we've said in the reports, under planning balance. The site is within a rapid inundation zone. It's a place where no residential development is permitted, end off. Obviously, there's material planning considerations that come into the planning balance. And there's quite a few points that have been raised, which in my eyes are legitimate reasons to possibly outweigh when it comes to the vote. One of the main ones is the site's within a conservation area. The conservation officer is very keen to support it because it would be an enhancement to the visual character. That's in the report. Subject to some conditions regarding sort of final finish. So Chairman, you were just going to touch on that, but if the resolution is to approve it, page 41, there's some conditions there that the Conservation Officer would like to be imposed. So it really ensure that's taken into account. The second point, Chairman, that you referred to is the sites within the zone of influence when it comes to considering the recreational impact from residential development within this zone. So there's two ways a developer or applicant can move from this. One is to complete an appropriate assessment and pay a contribution per dwelling, or they carry out their own assessment. And we've found since SAM's come into being, if you decided to do it yourself, it's probably going to be more expensive than paying the tiered money, which goes to Natural England, and they spend it through educational means and that sort of thing to fight the fight, as it were, with recreational pressure and that sort of influence. So that would be something that we would have to deal with before issuing a planning decision. And then obviously there's the flood risk condition. We have a stock condition for that, which I can obviously draw up and impose. And then obviously the time limit condition and a plans condition that's coming to mind straight away. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. There was one other point I did mean to make out, if I could have. They're going about the sequential test for Gould. This could be built. There is nowhere else in Gould. There is no. The rapid inundation zone, when it came from Capita, virtually wiped out. I believe I read there was about 8 deallocated sites in Gould, which were, I think, when I spoke with Nicholas Zaborski, added up to 550 houses. So we're just trying to reuse what we've got, and that's the crux of this matter, and especially places like in the conservation area. Yes, Councillor Robson.
Thank you, Chair. It's good to know that this doesn't have to be catapulted to strategic. That's good. So we're left here with basically the balance of harm and risk. We have from Councillor Jeffreys and the Town Council very positive responses to this. We have from the Gould Civic Society very positive response. We have from the Conservation Officer with reservations very positive response to this. It seems to me that everybody wants this apart from the desk followers at the Environment Agency. So I urge you to support this and do Gould a favour by approving this application with us. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, Councillor Wilkinson.
I fully understand that view, and I have, as I said, many times have I argued in favour of housing within Gould. I am, however, extremely uncomfortable with this one, and I would like to know which material planning reason is being used in order to approve this against the rapid inundation zone flood risk, which is the highest flood risk possible of any, and yet we are now going to put someone who may or may not go into their home and fall asleep on the couch when Gould floods. And let's be clear, Gould has flooded in the past. We're not here to say what's nice and what's good. We're here to do what's right. And the question is, if they want to do this, this is a great opportunity. I love it. And I think it's a great building to change as a conservation area. Put it on the first floor and have a sacrificial ground floor. And then we have an argument that they are safe and sound, whatever happens. But what we have here is people who are living on a ground floor with 600 mils to protect them against a rapid inundation zone, the highest flood risk we have, flood risk 3A, rapid inundation zone. I'm stunned that we can even suggest it, and I can't see what material planning reason that we can give to approve this against officers' recommendations? I'm sorry.
Councillor Coultish.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The material planning reason, as I said, is that the benefits outweigh the risk. The benefits being that it's of exceptionally high quality, it provides housing that's in need in Goole, it renovates an old unused building in a conservation area, all of those things that are in the plan and that has been talked about. Additional to that, the second material planning reason is that the mitigations outlined in the plan that are of exceptionally high quality, such as a 600 millimetre raised floor, the place of safety on the first floor, etc., mitigate the flood risk. So there's a good two.
Yes, Councillor Meredith, then I think we'll go to the vote on this. I think we've.
I'll bet Jane's very glad this is on YouTube because Councillor Coultish was rattling off reasons then speaking quicker than I do. So congratulations, I'm impressed. I think it's worth pointing out that, as I stated before, and I wanted to reiterate, that's why I put my hand back up, with regards to Councillor Wilkinson's comments, we have seen every type of housing application at this committee over the last decade with regard to Goole. We've seen flats in buildings where the entire dwelling was on the ground floor and thus a bedroom had to be there. And we've actually seen those 8-9 years ago approved. We've seen the goalposts somewhat shifted with the rapid inundation zone, the guidance from the EA, the advice of planning officers, and those applications have no longer been looked at favourably. So the first thing I'd suggest is that as a committee, I'd actually like to pat us all on the back. We are quite well reasoned and we do look at each application as we should on its individual merits. With that in mind, this individual application is right in the middle of what we're used to seeing. It has only got bedrooms upstairs, but it does have habitable rooms downstairs. So it's not as potentially risky as some we've seen, but it's not as attractive as, for example, the last application we saw, where it was all parking downstairs, so all the habitable spaces were first floor and above. So this is in the middle, and thus that's why I stated initially, it's an awkward one. So I suppose really it comes down to, do you share Councillor Wilkinson's perspective that that is a line in the sand that we shouldn't cross, as per advice? Or do we believe as committee members that Councillor Coultish's points top trump those? I, for one, am like a referendum, like Brexit. I'm 51-49, 52-48. I'm right on the line myself. But overall, the fact that there are people living down the road in houses built before the current policies who are in that boat means that they're just as vulnerable. Ultimately, we have a building that's in need of renovation. As Councillor Gill pointed out, we either let go crumble or we let it look after itself. That, to me, is the tipping point. And I just wanted to clarify that before you took us to a vote, Chairman, that there is a place for head in planning, but there's also a place for heart. And trying to square that circle is no easy task. So I imagine this will be a split vote and everyone voting their conscience. But I just thought a summation there might be useful.
Right. Last comment, please, Councillor Gill.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so as Councillor Meredith pointed out, this is potentially a bit of a halfway house, but from my understanding, having gone through the document, I presume the 600 mil level, presumably that does mitigate some flood thing. Presumably some expert has come up with that. Is that so? And is that what it's been based on, and therefore it can go ahead on that basis?
Well, through you, Chairman, we've said before, if you have a building that's flooding by any amount, you're potentially putting pressure on emergency services and such as that. So the modelling does vary within Goole, and I would be really cautious by just sticking to a specific figure. The threat to life, effectively, and building and property is that the risk zone sits right at the top. So it's right up there in terms of a breach and flood defences and other catastrophic events occurring at the same time. So Councillor Wilkinson is correct. We don't usually at this meeting support any sort of habitable use of ground floors. We always try and push them up above that space so members are at least a bit more comfortable in supporting development like that. But certainly having the ground floor used as habitable space, even lifting the sockets up at a certain height and flood evacuation warning, etc. Inevitably, the resources from emergency services will be under pressure in any event.
Last bit, councillor Gill, yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to sort of come on back. I mean, I can only compare this to somewhere like York. You've got the River Ouse that floods on a regular basis, and there are flood resilient homes and businesses and all sorts all the way along the river. If that is part of that, you know, mitigation that's in this new plan, then I can't see any reason not to support it. But thank you.
Thank you, councillor Gill. Right, we've had a proposal from councillor Coltish for approval, seconded by councillor Robson for approval of this application, but with officer recommendations, and also provide a complete appropriate assessment and pay the levy rate of £640 for the mitigation for SAMS, under SAMS. So all those in favour of...
Sorry, Chairman, just checking it's with the usual planning.
Will this... Yeah, but no referral to strategic planning, but as usual, this will then go to EA to give them the 6 weeks to appeal. No, have they finished that as well now?
Through you, Chairman, when we refer residential development to EA, contrary to their recommendation, it's only for major development. This isn't major development.
Thank you. Right, we'll go back to them again. So, recommendation for approval from councillor Coltish, seconded by councillor Robson. All those in favour, please raise your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Those against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Right. That has been voted through by a majority of 6 to 4. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, councillors. So that has been approved, subject to the officer recommendations and the CAMS report. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Now move on to agenda item number 6. Could come on that one, please, Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an application for planning permission for the construction of a hip to gable extension with a dormer to the rear and roof lights to the front, and a replacement 2-storey bay window to the front at 23 West Ella Road in Kirkella. The officer recommendation is refusal, and there are no updates to the report as printed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First speaker on this one is Mr. T. Davey, applicant's agent. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Davey, 30-second warning.
Good afternoon. The proposal is to add a rear dormer and a hip to gable extension to our client's family home. The existing dwelling forms the right-hand side of a pair of semi-detached dwellings. The officer's report makes frequent reference to symmetry being an important feature, but the pair of semis have no symmetry in their existing form. The submitted design does not change this current relationship of 2 semis which each have their own appearance. The proposal sits within a street scene consisting of a wide mix of different roof forms with gables, hips, dormers, parapets and turrets. Rather than being at odds with the street scene, the proposal simply adds to this mix of varied forms. The officer flags a concern of overlooking from the rear. However, in reality, the rear windows are no different to any other rear bedroom window providing views over the back garden area. Note, there has been no objection from any neighbour or from the parish council. To be clear, the rear dormer will not be visible from the street and causes no impact to the street scene. The proposed hip to gable extension is something that any other neighbour could carry out under permitted development rights. There are multiple examples of recent approvals for similar schemes within this area. These are at odds with the officer's recommendation. Ultimately, the proposal will provide valuable living space to the applicant with no impact to their neighbours or the street scene. To summarise, the proposal has received no objections from neighbours or the parish council. The design adds to the mix of existing forms in the street scene. The rear dormer is not visible from the public domain, and there are multiple examples of similar applications that have been approved. We hope very much that members are able to support the client's proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Davey. And now we have Councillor G McMaster.
Yeah, good afternoon, Chair, officers and committee. I'll just quickly add, I've met this gentleman for the first time when we arrived today, yet our speeches are pretty similar in some elements. This application is to extend the roof ridge on one side of a roof of a residential dwelling to create a little bit more space in the roof. The family need the ground floor bedroom free for an elderly relative who is suffering and needs round-the-clock care. The dwelling already has a bedroom in the roof space, but the area is required to add an ensuite bathroom. It's important to note that this application does not seek to alter the footprint of the house, merely the shape of the roof. Officers suggest this is not in keeping with street scene. With respect to our officers, that statement is wholly inaccurate and more subjective for the following reasons. The entire street has no uniform houses, which is a unique feature of its own. I refer to your PAX 6.4, page 52. It clearly states both properties, referring to its property it's attached to, have been visibly altered and extended to their respective side elevations, and so they are not exactly symmetrical. It states that in the PAC, that's not my words. Reason two, the dwelling to the right, as observed from the road, already has much the same alterations to the roof in the form of a dormer extension to create additional living space. Item 3, or reason 3, the roof on number 19, which is to the left, appears to have been altered and to some point at a time has the pitch altered of that dwelling, again covered by 6.4 on page 54. The subject dwelling is a semi-detached and it's attached to number 21. 21 has also had alterations to its roof, known as hipped roof, again to create additional living space. In addition, number 21 also has a dormer window attached to and extends towards the back of the house, and again to create additional living space in the roof. I refer you to chapter 6.5 of your PAC, which states there are some variations in roof styles in this locality. Hipped roofs are more prevalent, but that doesn't mean exclusive. So in your pack, it actually states that there's a variety. It can be argued that this adaptation actually effectively brings the dwelling into keeping with the rest of the houses.
Sessions left.
Additionally, please note there's been no objections from the parish or any residents, and I urge this committee please to use common sense and support this family who in turn need to support their elderly and infirm relatives. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McMaster. Right, I'll put this up. Yes, Councillor Robson.
Thank you, Chair. The business of who currently lives in the property is not a planning consideration. The planning is on the building, not on the lifestyle of the occupants. So I must disagree with Councillor McMaster on that one. I also disagree with him in terms of the design of it as well. In my view, it's horrendous overdevelopment for this house. And the only solution that would actually contribute rather than be a detriment to the street scene is an extended ridge line like next door have done, retaining the hip so that it is a mirror of next door at the front. The business of it, there being a dormer at the rear, is neither here nor there. It's how the pair appear. And there's absolutely no reason why they couldn't have extended the ridge, maintained the hip. The pair would look far better. So I have to disagree, and I propose refusal on this in line with officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Did you want to speak, Councillor Harrison?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think so. If I was slightly more generous than Councillor Robson in the overdevelopment, my concern would be then the aesthetics and the appearance of it. So I was referencing 6.9 and 6.10 in the report. by virtue of the size of it, and then it will all be done in black cladding, and then there's an issue raised with the alignment of it. I think even if you didn't have a problem with the size of it, it's the quality and the design of the aesthetics of it, which would, for me, would potentially cause a concern as well. So I'm not necessarily minded to second the refusal, but it doesn't look as if it's a particularly appealing development. It's been a bit clumsy in my naive view.
Any other councillors? Yes, Councillor Bobo.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I visited the street this morning there. I had a good look at the properties in the immediate vicinity. The hip roof style is the predominant feature there. Where there have been alterations to the front, they've been sympathetic and they've followed the hip roof design. I personally feel that this will be detrimental to the street scene, so I'm quite happy to follow the officer's recommendation for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors wishing to speak on this one at all? No. Oh, well, yes, Councillor Meredith.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't going to speak, but there was just something else that I wanted to check with officers before anybody went to a vote. And that is, please correct me if I'm wrong, but that the site currently has an existing permission that could be implemented for extensions to the front and rear. And that if this was approved today, that would sit on top of those. And so effectively, the owner could build up, out and out to the way as well.
Would that be correct, certainly?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. That's absolutely correct. At the end of last year, we granted planning permission for a scheme of works, including the conversion of the loft to a bedroom, which is on the screen before you there, maintaining the hipped roof form of the house. That included works to the front and rear of the property at ground floor level. And if you were to approve this today, they could combine both schemes and implement the ground floor elements of the previously approved scheme and the roof alterations proposed here. But like I say, we have approved a scheme of works that they can implement, which includes the conversion of the loft to habitable space to give them the accommodation that they require. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, Councillor Meredith.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Davey. Well, I think that really actually sums up my conclusion then. And I sit somewhere between Councillors Robson on one side and then sort of Boville and Harrison, who were sort of supporting the sentiment, but perhaps not with quite so much vehemence. But yeah, I think that the council has agreed that the principle of development is acceptable on this site and that something can be built there. And indeed, that's not only been agreed, but approved. And I too think that building there, it's a very large plot. If you look at it from a plan view on some of the maps provided, you can see that the property actually as a footprint is smaller than many of the neighbours. So I personally have no aversion to seeing building on this site, but if you look at the building, there is a lovely symmetry to it, especially in the pictures we saw earlier from the rear. It rises to a centre point. I fear that that would be lost and that would be incredibly detrimental. So I don't mind seeing this site developed. I don't have any objection to any building taking place, but I do have concerns, especially losing the hip end for that gable, that it would make the overall building, you know, the semi, look wonky, for want of a better word. And this is an awkward one. I'd like other councillors to speak so that I can mull my thoughts over a bit more and weigh a few more viewpoints, because I kind of want to support it. The principle's already been agreed, but at the same time, I have real concerns about the aesthetic impact and the street scene amenity. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Coltish.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I find myself, like Councillor Meredith, occupying a middle ground. However, the conclusion I've come to is that if this was approved today and there is a harm to the character of the street, then that's forever in a sense. Whereas if it's refused today, there's a chance for the applicant to go away and improve that impact on the character of the street and the character of the area, and for everyone on the committee to come to a consensus that the development is acceptable, and that's a win-win for everyone. So for that reason, Mr. Chairman, I'll be voting for refusal in line with officers' recommendations, and hope maybe the applicant can come back with a brilliant scheme that we can all support.
Is that a second in the refusal, the proposal from Councillor Robson? Yeah. Sorry, I do apologise, Councillor Boville. No sold a moment, Councillor Robson. Did you want to speak on that one, Keith? Was it you wanted to speak? Oh, sorry, I thought you put your hand up. Yes, Councillor Robson.
Thank you, Chair. Just bearing in mind what Councillor Meredith said about the overdevelopment of the site. I meant when I said it was horrendous overdevelopment, I didn't mean of the site. The site is well big enough to accommodate it. I mean of the building itself. It's an overdevelopment of a building that is full of character. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Gill.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've been mulling this over most of the morning, actually, and I'm trying to come to some conclusion. I think for me, having heard what's been said and the speakers, looking at the street scene, I think for me it's just the hip roof that's not there. It's just not there. So I'm inclined to go along with the officers on this. It just looks a bit imbalanced, really, compared to the neighbouring property. So that's my view at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to speak again, Councillor? Yeah, I think I agree. When I look at the plans, I think it's just totally out of character. It's you know, especially when they got the planning permission for the first lot as well. This could end up to being one enormous property. So you know, right. So we'll move to the vote then. Right. All those in favour for the application as recommended for refusal set out in the report, please put your hands up. Those against? Councillor Wilkinson. Any abstentions? No. Right. That planning application is refused for the reasons set out in the report. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Now move on to appeals. Oh,
Thank you, Chairman. This item covers the proposed submission Ellicott Neighbourhood Plan, which was submitted to the Council for examination. The Neighbourhood Plan has been prepared by Ellicott Parish Council. It will introduce new planning policies within Ellicott Parish that consider things like design, character, heritage and local community facilities. The submission plan is currently undergoing public consultation, which ends on Friday, the 20th of June. The plan will then be examined by an independent examiner to ensure its conformity with the local plan, national policy and other basic conditions. If accepted, the plan will then be put to referendum within Ellicott Parish before being made. Once made, the plan will be used to consider planning applications within Ellicott Parish alongside the East Riding Local Plan and the National Planning Policy Framework. Members might wish to respond to the consultation as a committee or as individuals, and if they do, they should do so by the 20th of June 2025. And if you do have any queries regarding the plan or its content, please contact Forward Planning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
thank you very much. So, yes, Councillor Meredith.
Thank you, Chair. I took advice from officers earlier and discovered that I don't need to declare an interest in this, even though I was a member of the Ellicott Neighbourhood Plan Working Group with the Parish Council, because it's not really for us to vote on today. I believe it's more for information purposes. That being said, I would like to take this opportunity to offer the committee some reassurances. It's a very robust document. It's taken a few years to formulate. There was a consultation undertaken in January by the Parish Council, which was well attended by local residents, with many tens of double dozens of people attending, which in the small village of Ellicott represents probably a higher proportion of respondents than you see in most consultations that take place. So I just really wanted to say I've got the document has got my full support. The Parish Council put a lot of time, effort, energy into this and taken a lot of advice from experts in the planning field in all different manners of expertise. So really, I just suggest to the committee, as far as the proposal goes, that we note this, that we encourage people who are so minded to engage in the consultation. And I can't think of anything in the document that should be cause for concern or even the raising of an eyebrow.
Thank you very much, Councillor Meredith. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. I notice it says that is in general conformity with the strategic policies contained within our development plan. can I just ask the officers, there's nothing that contradicts any of our local plan, hopefully. I mean, I just thought it might be an advantage as I've read through it and I can't see anything that contradicts it. But I also notice it also says does not breach and is compatible with EU obligations. What EU obligations do we have now since we've come out?
I would reiterate, Chairman, if you've got any questions, please forward those to forward planning. I mean, I don't know the answer, Councillor, I'm afraid. The committee, sure, you know, if you've got any responses to make to the neighbourhood plan, then please do make them, you know, personally or as a committee as a whole. If any questions like that of a technical nature, do please ask our colleagues in forward planning. That's what they're there for. And in terms of conformity, the plan will be independently examined by a planning inspector, and that will then go to referendum, and the community will decide whether or not to adopt it. So that's how the neighbourhood plan process works. Then it sits alongside the East Riding local plan as a decision-making document for planning applications. Now, in terms of EU regulations, I can't answer your question, I'm afraid. I'm not sure.
Yes, Councillor Robson.
Thank you, Chair. I probably know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Would the Localism Act of 2011 be cancelled and replaced by the new National Infrastructure Bill? If not, how would it be affected by it? I want to hear your take on this, officers.
Is that a question relevant to the lease to the Ellicott neighbourhood plan?
Well, sorry, Chick, please carry on.
It was a question. You don't ask me the questions, I ask you the questions.
I think through you, Mr. Chairman, the Localism Act is quite a large act and it amended lots of different sections of the Principal Planning Act. So the answer to that would be, and I haven't got it off the top of my head, but I could get it for you. If the national consent regime specifically and expressly says it replaces a particular part of the Localism Act, then yes, but I'm not aware that it does. The Localism Act is an act that's amended certain sections of the Principal Planning Act, and it also sits side by side with it. So we take parts of the Localism Act, most of them are still operational. So I think you'll find that the National Consent Scheme doesn't necessarily replace it, it sits alongside it, unless it has expressly said in certain parts, this replaces section whatever of the Localism Act. But if you've got a specific question, I can articulate that for you. I can certainly find out for you. But the Localism Act is still very much sitting there, because it didn't just amend parts of the Principal Planning Act in terms of general planning policy. It also amended sections to do with enforcement and that kind of thing. So it was one of these acts that comes in and it's a bit of a coverall, and it plugs gaps because it responds to particular judgments in the courts and stuff, and plugs gaps that weren't there already plugged by the legislation as it was. And I mean, when you think about it, the Planning Act now was introduced in 1990. There's parts of it that are becoming out of date. The principle, though, of following national and local policy as the starting point for determining applications still stays, and it always will stay in one form or another, I think. Bit of a nebulous answer to a very straight question. But
No, I get all that, and thank you. That's the kind of thing that I was kind of expecting to hear. But you know, it's very important to us as councillors that we have an opportunity to represent our residents locally. And this is what kind of worries us, is that the voice of local people is going to be taken away from them. This is why I asked the question. Thank you, Chair.
if I may just come back, because it is an important point, and I see this where I live in terms of things like the solar array, the big solar farm developments, which I suspect is a concern of yours, Councillor. Yes, it's quite fair to say that the government has taken some of these major renewable energy schemes and taken them not totally out of the hands of local democracy and yourselves and the officers, but to a large extent, yes, they have. And we are consultees now. We have to respond, and obviously communities themselves can respond. The developers who propose these schemes have statutory community engagement processes to follow, and they do that. But at the end of the day, the decision is ultimately taken out of the hands, and it's done by central government. Does that make sense as well to you?
It certainly does, and that's our concern. Thank you.
Right, last on the one is Councillor Meredith.
Thank you. Well, I too now have a question for Mr. Deavy, just to make it a hat trick and see if we can make him sweat. But also, just before I do, just with regards to Councillor Wilkinson and Councillor Robson's comments, I think it is worth noting that during the process of this neighbourhood plan being drafted, the East Riding adopted a design code. Now, I don't know how well the people in this room know Ellicott, but it is a fabulously picture postcard village. There are no road signs there, very few street lamps. The ones that exist are of the old variety, very classic. There's no road markings. The parish council don't permit the East Riding to use weed killer. They're very, very proud of their street scene, and considering how fantastic it is, I'd argue rightly so. Now, with the design guide existing, if the neighbourhood plan said everything that the design guide does, then it would be entirely in keeping with East Riding planning policy. The fact it goes above and beyond that means that it is mostly in keeping because it adds requirements. And I'll inform you all now that the reason that Ellicott Parish Council undertook this whole exercise is because, along with residents, the entire community wanted to see what they consider a beautiful part of the world preserved and protected as strongly as is possible, which indeed is the purpose and the motivation behind the document. So I hope that adds some clarification from an insider scoop, if you will, as to why the parish council put in a lot of effort to really ensure the bar was set high with regard to visual amenity, so that, like the last application we had here today, there is a very clear document stating what is and isn't acceptable from a street scene perspective. Which does lead me to my question. It does say on the East Riding website that comments will be displayed online. However, there aren't any displayed there yet, and I was wondering if they will be posted before the consultation closure, because it may be that some comments motivate others to comment. But if they all get taken in and then they all get put on after the consultation, there's not really much in the way of engagement. It's just shouting into a room rather than building upon previous points raised. So could Mr. Deavy confirm if and when the comments that have been submitted, including my own, which was glowing, by the way, will be on the website?
I can certainly check for you when they will go live. I suspect, as with comments on planning applications, there's a process to go through for checking for defamatory or libelous sort of content before they just go live on the council's website. So I'm assuming there's a checking process involved, but I don't know where forward planning are up to with that, or whether they'll go live after the consultation closes or before. It's not long, is it? 20th of June. Yeah, so I'll check and come back to you if I can, councillor.
Last question, Councillor Robson. We move on. I'm aware of time. Moving on. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to point out that that Councillor Meredith is always worth quoting, but I don't know whether it was worth quoting the last bit as you mentioned, because I'd kind of fallen asleep.
Well, right, having that comment, we'll swiftly move on to the appeals decisions.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 8A on page 75 was an appeal relating to a single dwelling on an allocated housing site in Anderby. It was a very technical refusal and appeal on the basis of flood risk data. So Persimmon Homes have planning permission to develop that site with housing. Part of the site was identified as being at risk of future flooding in our strategic flood risk assessment. So the allocation policy says no built development in those parts of the site. The scheme that they've got permission for, that they've built or building out, avoided all of the housing within the future flood zone and had that area as open space. They then came back and said they relying on alternative data from the Environment Agency and other sources to say that this was now no longer at risk of flooding. It was very technical, relying on different sources of data. We had input from our colleagues in forward planning, looking at the evidence base for the local plan and where that flood risk data comes from. Ultimately, we refused planning permission on flood risk failure to comply with the sequential test, unacceptable risk to future occupiers of that property. During the appeal process, the EA released new flood risk data taking into account climate change, which very much reflected the strategic flood risk assessments, predictions in terms of future flood risk in that area. So I'm happy to say the appeal was dismissed, but it was very, very technical. If you have a chance to read through it, please do. But it's very much about different sources of flood risk data. That's the site, just out of interest. So the site is, like I say, it's in the process of being developed. The other thing, there was a second reason for refusal, which we weren't successful on, and that was the other houses were built with the minimum level of mitigation because they were outside the existing flood zone and the future flood zone. This property being in the future flood zone, they proposed to build it 600 millimeters out of the ground. So we said a house 600 millimeters out of the ground next to a neighbour would be incongruous. They managed to convince the inspector that it could be built without looking, miles higher than the neighbouring property. So we weren't successful on that particular point, but we did win the overall flood risk argument. 8B, if there's no questions on that one, and I hope there isn't because it was very technical. 8B was
Only that they should have brought it here. We'd have approved it.
8B JJ Smart Repairs on Station Road in Cottingham. This was for a retrospective application for an extraction flue that had been installed in connection with a paint booth on a vehicle workshop. This is believe it or not, this is a public right of way that runs down the side of the Beck and Swanland in Cottingham, sorry. This flue projects out over the public right of way. There's no mitigation, there's no noise mitigation, there was no mitigation for fumes. It just expels extracted air from the paint booth over the railway lines just beyond this. So there's this Beck, the public footpath, and the railway line beyond. Beyond that, there's neighbouring properties. I haven't got a map to show you, but we refused it on inadequate information and on impact on use of the public right of way, and we were successful in both cases. But I think they did say noise could be mitigated. But yeah, the appeal was dismissed.
Item 8C was a householder application considered under delegated powers. So this was in a house 18 Canal Side West, Newport, a 2-story flat roof extension. So 2 issues at play. One was impact on area character, and secondly, the Crean building impact on windows and outlook. Very, very short assessment by the inspector, but essentially disagreed on the first point, considered that there was a few similar rear extensions, a 2-story along Canal West, which isn't evident on that block, but they were on other blocks. But he or she did agree that there was impact adversely on a window for the neighbour, so that was dismissed. And then finally, 8D, item 8D was an application to retain a fence. You'll see here on May Cottage, Mill Lane, Seaton Ross. Don't know if there's any photographs. Okay, yeah. So there was a hedge around this property, and it's one of the properties as you enter into Seaton Ross, so highly visible. And that was removed and replaced by this sort of timber fence that you would find in a persimmon home or a major housing developer site. So we consider it to be incongruous in the street scene, and the inspector agreed with this. So that's now over to enforcement to deal with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Keith. Yep. Another good track record on appeals. Right. I think that concludes today's meeting, everybody. Thank you very much, councillors and officers. Another good meeting, but thank you very much indeed. Thank you.